right. Ready? All right. What's going on? Hey, everybody. It's Corneilous County here. I got something very special for you. The one, only Whitney. How are you, Whitney?
I am doing great, Corneilous. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Today, you got something special for everybody, right? I got a special presentation that you want to share with us, right?
We do. I
All right.
do.
All right, sure. Go right ahead.
All right. All right, Cornelius. Well, I wanted to share a little bit about my story, how I got in the syndication business. I also want to help you, be prepared to understand a little more about what real estate syndication is, and then also just some of the obstacles that I've had along the way getting to where we're at now. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been an easy road, that's for sure. But I want to share some of that with you so you know what to expect, and also just so you're more educated about real estate syndication in general as well. Are you with me, Cornelius?
I'm here. I'm still here. I'm with you.
All right, great. All right, here we go. So, I want to ask you first, do you believe it's possible for you to close on $50 million of real estate in 1 year? And if you say no, then that's your first problem. Then, and that was mine as well. Because over the last year, we've closed on over $50 million in real estate. And in the next few months or next few weeks, actually, we will close on 30 million more. And so there's a big mindset shift that has to happen. And I want to help you to see kind of my path through that and help you to get there as well. So just to recap, so over the last year, we've closed on over $50 million in real estate. We've added over 450 units to our portfolio. We've done a daily podcast now, and this was over the last 2 years, but 650 shows with industry leaders from all over the world ultimately, but obviously mostly in the United States. But 650 podcasts. My network of investors and industry leaders have exploded, and that success got me on this stage and many others as well. But I did all this while having a full-time job and a full-time family. So I say all that to say you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it too. And you probably like to know the first step that I took, and I want to get into that. But first, I want to tell you, it started with changing my mindset. And I had to realize that my surroundings had to change, that if I wanted the surroundings to change, that I had to be the first to change. And change is hard. Change is very hard. But it started by attending conferences just like this. And really opening my eyes to many things about real estate and what other people were doing, and just showing myself that, okay, if others can do it, I can do it too. So I want to tell you a little more about my background as well, just so you can understand a little more about how this came about. But in March of 2001, I decided to join the military. I just knew it was the right thing to do. Of course, I had no idea that in just a few short months our country would be at war, and I would find myself in Iraq, toting around a machine gun, praying every day that I get to go home. And so not everyone in my squad made it home. But that military training taught me to have a never give up mentality. And that kept me going when many lives are on the line. And I just ask you, are you prepared to keep going no matter what? Because I feel like being an entrepreneur sometimes, you have to be just willing to keep going no matter what happens. And those are the people who have the most success. I feel like they keep getting knocked down, but they keep getting back up. And so, by the way, in case you're curious, I made it home alive. So, next, out of 1,200 applicants and only 5 positions, I was hired by Kentucky State Police as a police officer. And that never give up mentality became something that I had to have every day. And it had to show from the way I wore my uniform to the way that I responded to every dispatch. During that time, I was making next to nothing. I like to say it's a shame what our police officers are paid. But because of that lack of income, that pushed me into real estate. I wasn't raised in an entrepreneurial family or in a family that invested anything in real estate or knew anything about owning real estate. I barely owned a home, and so it wasn't anything that I was introduced that way. But because of this lack of income, I started seeking what else, is out there. And at this time, I met so many people this was in 2009 actually, that were buying properties and were having success. And I thought, okay, if they can do it, I can do it too. But soon after, still looking for a better career path, not knowing what real estate would turn into for us, I became a federal agent. And that moved my wife, Chelsea, and I to Virginia, where we still live now. But a few years later, I made a living with a whip. And that's right. I became a horse trainer. And so you may have been thinking of something else, but actually, it's been a passion of mine since I was a little kid. I'd always wanted to train horses. I just dreamed about being a cowboy. And a few years ago, my wife and I finally had the farm that we had always dreamed about. And I was training horses professionally. I was doing clinics all over the country and doing just training lots of people horsemanship skills. And so it was a place that I had dreamed about being, since I was a little bitty boy. But my schedule became so busy that I would be in the arena training horses till midnight most nights. And it would cause me to miss the things that were most precious to me, like time with my wife, Chelsea, and our boys, Samuel and Elijah. And so one day it hit me that was not what was best, and I had to make a change. And I want to share that because you may have a passion that's ultimately holding you back. And I can see now that my passion to ride horses, did hold us back for many years. And I had to see the bigger picture. And when I'll explain that a little more in a few minutes. But we did have a few rentals, but I was tired of looking for more tenants and toilets. And soon I was introduced to the syndication business. And I couldn't believe that I hadn't known about this so many years earlier. So I enjoyed structure and discipline from previous training and knew that was a business model that I could scale. With what I already knew about real estate and what I'd begun to learn about the syndication business, we jumped in quickly and completely. We sold our farm. And so I just want to share with you about, how much of a passion that was to say, we sold our farm and sold everything related to that business to make the real estate business happen. And so, and I'll explain a little more about syndication in a few minutes, but a month later, after selling our farm, I attended many conferences just like this, and my eyes were opened. There were so many others that were accomplishing and doing things that I didn't even know were possible. I met guys who were buying 100-unit complexes, and that seemed so out of reach for me. But they had only been in the business a few years. Okay. So I heard amazing speakers telling me of techniques of how to scale my business, and they gave me the belief too that I could make it happen. So soon I started a daily podcast, and it's called the Real Estate Syndication Show. But over the last 2 years, I've interviewed over 650 experts. So this gave me rapid credibility, exposure, and results. So my network of investors and industry leaders exploded. This was my own university, and it costs as much as a university as well. But it allowed me to ask any questions I had of all the experts. That podcast also pushed me to build teams, to hire more people, and to scale our business and brand. That daily podcast got me on this stage and many other stages. So I want you to be thinking about, a thought leadership platform that you could create. I could talk for many hours just on this subject alone, but I just want you to think about what you could do to create a platform and put really the fear behind you of putting yourself out there. So people have to know who you are and what you're doing, and they have to start developing trust in you ultimately. And so if they don't know you, they can't trust you. And so a thought leadership platform puts you in front of the room. Ultimately, and as the expert, the cool part is that you don't have to be an expert to start a thought leadership platform. So it could be a podcast, it could be a meetup, a YouTube channel, just to name a few. It could be a blog. There's many avenues that maybe you find you have a unique skill in where you can share with other people what you're doing and build that brand and that thought leadership platform for yourself. So while we're excited about our growth of our business, I want you to know a little more about what's behind that growth, and it's something that you should think about for yourself as well. So one day, my wife, Chelsea, and I, we were listening to a pastor talk about how they had adopted and how there are over 160 million orphans in the world. I mean, that's half the size of the U.S. population. And did you know it can cost $40,000 to $60,000 to bring a child home through adoption? So we had only been married a few years. We had never discussed adopting before. But immediately we asked ourselves, why would we not adopt? So 2 years ago, or 2 years later, I'll say, my first son, Samuel, came home from Ethiopia. A year after that, our second son, Elijah, came home through adoption. And just a few months ago, our daughter, Eden Joy's adoption became final as well. So my wife and I are now on a mission to help families in the process of adoption. And this quickly became our why behind LifeBridge Capital. So we committed half of our profits to helping families with this financial burden of the adoption process. We know many families who, when they hear of that, the $40,000 to $60,000 burden, their immediate response is, well, that's more than I make in a year, and they're just shut down right there. And so, and it's a real shame that so many children don't get that opportunity, and families don't get that opportunity that they would otherwise. But you've probably heard before about how people talk about, why your why is so important to success, and maybe you're tuning out about that. And I just want to say, I did the same thing, and I would tune out as soon as someone was talking about that stuff. And I would say, let's get to the meat and potatoes. Let's give me some actionable steps. And I would tune out. But I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Having our why changed everything for us, and is beginning to change everything for many others as well. So why did our business take off? So our business began to take off because of one thing, second to the Lord's hand, of course, and that was that I had to change. I had to better understand my why and change what I did on a daily basis from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. Where I spent my time, my friends, my vision for the future, all that had to change. So there's a few quotes that I love sharing with people just regarding this topic. And Jim Rohn says, income seldom exceeds personal development. And I just want you to think about that. And I can look back over the last few years for myself and see that exactly. When my daily habits changed, I started educating myself. That's when my income started to change as well, or our business started to take off. So Henry David Thoreau says, you cannot dream yourself into a character. You must hammer and forge yourself one. And think about that, hammer and forge. That's hard work. It's hard. That's hard work. And that's exactly what it's taken us. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, the only person you're destined to become is the person you decide to be. And it is a decision. It is a decision to change your habits, to change the way you do things. And so you can achieve things that are bigger than maybe you ever dreamed of. So we had to overcome many challenges through this process. And for almost 3 years, I've missed most meals with my family. I would be up at 5 a.m. taking calls before I went to my day job, as a federal agent, and then I may be in the office until 10 p.m., many nights as well, or after. So, when I would get home from work. So it was not easy, but you have to keep moving forward, and you have to do it. And I just choose to have the thought process of, let's not focus on how difficult it's going to be, but let's focus on how to get started. And so show me the way, and let's just start making it happen instead of focusing on the difficulty. So soon, after interviewing hundreds of experts, I recognized a pattern, and the people that had really rapid results, they also usually had a business partner in this business anyway. And so Chelsea and I, my wife, had been praying for a business partner for a long time. I had been asked by many people to partner and had turned them down. I treated this decision just like a marriage. And so I didn't want to make a mistake and lose all the investors' trust that I'd worked so hard to gain. So at conferences, I networked, had meetings and meals with as many people as possible. And at a large table one night, I heard a guy talking about his faith and his family and everything he'd accomplished in the syndication business in a very short period of time. I could tell he was someone that was as motivated as I was, and he had complementary skills. And so, I just told him that I'd been looking for a partner and he seemed to fit the bill. And then, I mean, we went through a long vetting process and just ensuring that this was a good fit. But his name is Sam Rust, and Sam and I have now been able to accomplish so much more than I ever could have on my own. So, why start with large multifamily? I want to get into some just things about multifamily and syndication, just so you are better educated about it. When you go to look at that first deal, or you go to, speak with that broker, or go to speak with that operator, whoever it may be, I want you to have a better understanding about multifamily and why we choose the syndication process. But there's lots of reasons. But it's a common misconception that you have to start small. And it's not that you can't start small, or that you have to begin with flipping or wholesaling or something like that. You can do large multifamily from the beginning, and it's not for everybody to start that way, but it can be done. And that's how many get started. But I'm proof that it doesn't have to be that way. I did have a few small rentals and even up to a 15 unit, but then I partnered on 2 properties that were 400 units each. Okay. And so with large multifamily, instead of having, 50 to 100 single family homes all over town, we can have all those at one location. And so instead of me trying to manage all of those homes myself, we have professional on-site management that can take care of the day-to-day operations. And I'm also able to allow hundreds of investors to partner with me. This provides them with the benefits of investing in real estate that they normally would not have access to. So we can increase the value. Let's say we increase the value of the property by $100 per door. The more doors you have, the bigger difference it makes, right? And we're going to go into that just a little bit more. So let's see, having trouble. There we go. So you need to know what net operating income is, and cap rate, of course. It's very, very important when we're talking about commercial real estate. And so, net operating income is going to be your gross income minus all your expenses. And just remember that there's a direct correlation between net operating income and multifamily's value, or the market value of a commercial piece of real estate. Okay. So when you can increase the NOI, there'll be a measurable increase in the property value. All right. And we'll go into that a little bit deeper in just a minute. But know also that the cap rate, it's the driving force behind the value of commercial real estate. It allows you to measure the profitability of an investment compared to other properties. Okay. So when the cap rate, while the cap rate is very important, it doesn't tell you everything. And that's a misconception as well. There's so much weight on that, and it does have a big weight. However, it doesn't tell you everything, but it is kind of a generalized indicator as well. So let's go into some, I won't get too complicated here, but I want to show you some numbers that will help you to better understand kind of what I'm talking about. So if you have a single family home and increase that income, let's say by $100, you have $100 more monthly, and you have $1,200 more annually. And you really haven't changed the value of the property, by doing that. Maybe you did a few things to change the value some, but not much, just based on that. And if you increase the rent, let's say on a 200 unit property by $100 per door, that's an increase of $20,000 monthly and $240,000 annually. So for example, if the NOI, if the net operating income is $1.5 million, and divide that by a 6% cap rate, that means the property values at $25 million. So the net operating income, let's say, is $1,740,000 because of that increase, divided by 6% cap rate. That means that property value now is $29 million. Okay, so $100 per door. Now, we've raised the value of the property many millions of dollars. So, and I'll share a real life example. We have a 180 unit property that has 89 2-bedroom units. So when we purchased that, they were renting for around $780, $781, I think. The target rent for those 2-bedroom units after renovating them was $995. Okay, it's a $214 increase. Within 6 months, these two bedroom units are renting for $1,250. Okay, and that's an increase of $469 per 2-bedroom. So times 89 units, this is an increase of $41,741 monthly and around $500,000 annually. So the NOI of 1.2 million is now 1.7 million from the 2-bedroom units, that increase to the 2-bedroom units alone. So, increase the value of $7 to $8 million more just by that alone. So, and that's a massive just difference in how it's valued compared to single family. I take investor calls almost daily, and it always surprises me. How many don't know about passive income, and just what that is. Or it just almost seems like a dream. It doesn't seem like something that's really obtainable. But it is very, very obtainable. But it does seem like a dream, and it is almost like a dream, but it is a very reliable stream of income. When you learn to do some due diligence on an operator and on a deal, you can invest in a syndication and it be nearly passive ultimately after you invest, besides reading some updates and receiving your distributions. So real estate syndication. Syndication, you can syndicate lots of things, but ultimately in real estate syndication, it's just taking lots of investors and bringing them together to accomplish purchasing a large property that they would normally never have access to on their own. They wouldn't be able to purchase this property on their own, but because we can bring so many people together, we can do a larger property or purchase a larger deal. And that's the syndication business. Everybody's looking for investors, right? And, and people always ask, Whitney, where are investors? Where are you meeting investors? And I always say, investors are everywhere. And they're from a real estate conference to the other side of the gas pump. You need to be thinking about, who you're speaking to at all times. You never know who that person is that you're speaking to, or who they know, or how you can add value to them, or who they can introduce you to, things like that. So always be thinking about how you can add value to people, and you'll find investors everywhere. But it kind of goes back to that thought leadership platform too, and just talking about what you're doing at all the time, and people knowing who you are and what you're up to. You're probably wondering about returns, I like to talk about preferred returns a little bit, because it's a big misconception. People think that they're guaranteed, and that's not what preferred means. And ultimately, preferred means that you're going to get, like an investor may get an 8% preferred return. And that means they're going to get the first 8% of any cash flow. If a property doesn't cash flow, there's no preferred return. So I just like for investors to know that it's important that there maybe is a preferred return, because then that does mean that you're getting paid first, though, before an operator. So just know that it does mean you're going to get paid first, but it's not guaranteed. That makes sense, Corneilous?
It did. It did.
Cash flow split. So a lot of investors get, confused about when there's a split. So if you know that there's an 8% preferred return, anything above that, there may be a split. So just know that a deal can be structured any way that an operator can think of. I mean, they can structure these deals there's any way that they want, but you have to do it in a way that's favorable to investors or who's going to invest, right? But you want to understand, what that split means, because you'll hear that 8% preferred return and 70-30 split, and then there might be a waterfall, and it can sound complicated, but ultimately, if you have a bucket of cash flow, the first 8% of that cash flow is going to go to the limited partners or the passive investors, and then the rest of that there'll be some type of split. Typically it's 70-30. But it could be 50-50. It could be 90-10. But just know that the bigger portion typically goes to the passive investors. I've seen it done the other way, but it depends on the deal, depends on the operator, depends on how much risk is involved. Those types of things that you have to assess. Okay, what is the split? Is it reasonable compared to the risk involved, the type of property, maybe the experience of the operator, things like that. Waterfall structure. And this does confuse lots of people. but it doesn't have to be that complicated. Ultimately, there's going to be, that pool of cash that we're talking about, that it's going to go to that 8% preferred return. Then there's going to be that 70-30 split. But we may say, okay, once these other buckets fill up after that 70-30 split, let's say that there's a 15% return hurdle, they'll call it sometimes, or waterfall. Well, as soon as it reaches that, it may split again. Okay, so you may have an 8% preferred return, then a 70-30 split, and then once investors reach a 15% internal rate of return or something like that, it may split again to say 50-50, or 60-40. And so just understand there may be different hurdles or waterfalls where the split may change. And then this is something kind of new in the business. But it's called a dual class structure. And we're doing this on a deal right now that we're funding right now, and it's already oversubscribed. I'll put that out there. So, but it's a pretty neat thing. It gives investors options, but it's called a dual class structure. So depending on where you're at in your investment journey, you may want something that's a little less risk, but a little higher, say, steady return. Or you may have, a longer projected time to invest, and you may be able to take a little bit more risk for a little more gain long term. And that's what this dual class structure ultimately allows investors to do. So there'll be, and it's kind of, we call it a capital stack, and you'll hear that term sometimes. But if we think about a stack, let's think, on the bottom of that stack is going to be our debt. All right. The debt, they're going to have the least amount of risk, and they're going to be paid first, right? Ultimately, the bank's going to get paid. But then right above that, it's going to be our Class A investors. And I'll use a recent deal for an example. There was the Class A investors, they'll get a 10% preferred return for the life of the deal, but they don't receive any split above that. It's 10% preferred return. Okay. And then, but after that Class A investor, there's a Class B investor, and you make this decision when you're deciding to invest with that operator in that specific deal. You say, well, I want to put this much capital in Class A, or this much in Class B, or all of it one way or the other. But the Class B investors are going to have a slightly less preferred return. Sometimes it's going to be 6 or 7, sometimes 8%. And then they'll also share, though, in that split after that. Okay. So, but they have just slightly more risk, because they're getting paid after the Class A investors. Okay. And so we're going up the stack. And then obviously the general partnership or the operators like myself would be above that in a Class C, but they would be above the investors then. So they're going to have, the most risk, but they're also going to be paid last. Okay. So just so you can think about that deal structure, as a capital stack, but it's not that complicated. But just know that it's kind of a new thing, and it does give you some options as an investor, depending on where you're at in your investment journey. So, I want to highlight some things that we did just for success in this business. And I did. The first thing I had to change was my mindset. And I had to see and believe that it was possible. My habits had to change, whether that's from getting up early to just educating myself just constantly. And I had to be committed to making it happen, no matter what the time commitment was. I had to be willing to just see it as, the next step and keep pushing forward, as opposed to seeing how difficult or how big the mountain was. And so, and just knowing that if they can do it, I can do it too. I didn't want to spend more. I didn't want to spend more money on a mentor at first, but also, it was one of the best things that accelerated my growth. It was finding the right mentor, and I would encourage you to have numerous mentors, but to really consider, even if it means hiring someone, that it can be so worth it. So I started networking as hard as I could go. And your network is everything in this business and in most businesses. But this is a team sport, team business for sure. There's so many people that go into making this happen. It is a team business. But I also built the thought leadership platform that we discussed. I pushed to do a daily show. Okay. And so doing that daily show, gain the network, or, you know, and the investor base. And I just remember, you know, that was my own university. It cost a fortune to do that, but it was my own university. I got to ask all the experts any questions that I had. Okay. It pushed me to grow our team and to think bigger. I also found my business partner, you know, and that was a big turning point. Found somebody that that was, like I said, was motivated, had complementary skills, and just somebody I felt I knew I could trust. But we did a lot of due diligence on each other before we committed to that partnership. But that was a big turning point as well, in just the acceleration of the growth of our business. So I've now left that federal agent position, and it's something we've worked so hard for, you know, for many years. But you know, we left the federal agent position. I'm now working full time, you know, as a real estate entrepreneur, and this was just not easy. We had to overcome many challenges through this process, and I'm going to highlight just a few, because you know, I don't want people to think that it's all roses, you know, or that it's all easy getting there, because it's not. But you know, for almost 3 years, you know, you think this may be something simple, but I had to miss most meals with the family. You know, miss most meals with family. You know, I'm up at 5 a.m. most mornings taking calls before work, you know, or be in the office till 10 o'clock or after, so many nights. You know, many said I was crazy, right? You know, many said I was crazy. But, you know, but they're not doing this, right? Many said, don't do a daily podcast. I was at 2 different conferences and had dinner with 2 different individuals that are very well known, that most of you have probably heard of. And I'm telling them about that I'm going to do a daily podcast. And both of them said, Whitney, you're crazy. You know, don't do that. Don't do that. And so I went back to my mentor, and I was sharing with him what these 2 individuals said, because of who these people were. You know, it made me question, like, well, maybe I should reconsider this, right? You know, and then, but I also asked many other people who were podcasting, you know, about doing a daily podcast. We were talking about it, and they all expressed how much work it was. They all told me, oh, it's so much work. I heard all the moans and groans, right? But they were all doing a weekly show. And so it really made me question, should I be doing this? And I did. I went to my mentor and I said, this is what these people have said, and these people have said. And he said, Whitney, you know, that's why you have to do it, because nobody else is going to do it. And so, and I just say that to say, you need a mentor, you need somebody on your side, because there's times when you just think, okay, you know, is this the right decision? And at the time, I think, you know, I was probably ignorant too, to just how much work it was going to be, but I'm thankful that we did pursue it. I'm thankful that we did pursue a daily podcast. You know, it did require me recording 12 to 15 shows a day at times, you know, amongst doing other things, or getting home from work and doing 4 or 5 shows in an afternoon, numerous times a week, things like that. But it, you know, a lot of it started too by just having that mindset of, where do I get started, instead of focusing on how much work it's going to be. And just something I always like to point out is my wife, Chelsea, she worked as hard as I did, and still does. She's not into real estate, but she's very passionate about our why and about our mission. But she took care of everything at home, including 3 kids and me. You know, so I try to just let everyone know, like, it's a team sport, even in the house. And I could not have done it without her as well, and just her support. So this path isn't for everyone. I wouldn't even suggest it for everyone. But you must change your mindset before you can change yourself. And it's a must. Thank you, Cornelious.
Wow, man, that was amazing. Oh man, so many value bombs there. Got a couple quick questions for you, if you got a moment.
Sure.
Talk mainly about changing your mindset. You know, it says so easily, but I'm pretty sure it's probably one of the hardest challenges that people face. So, with that said, how are you able to change your mindset, and then kind of get in some of those daily habits you say that is very core to your success?
Yes. So important. And I think it goes back a lot to how you're raised, right? You know, and who you're around and things like that, as far as your mindset. And I had to change those things. I'll tell you one book that I'll never forget. I wouldn't say I agree with everything in this book, but I will say that it helped me think about my day better, is The Miracle Morning. and I think it was probably 3 years ago or so, or maybe a little more, that I read that book, and it really just made me think about the structure of my morning. Okay. And if it did nothing else other than that, it helped me so much, because now, or at that time, it helped me to structure that morning. And now, to think about, okay, how much time am I reading? How much time do I have to study? How much time, am I educating myself? And so, by doing that, it allowed me to read so many other books over the last couple of years that have helped me to change my mindset or increase my knowledge base or all kinds of things, or just to improve our business, and our brand. But then also, as far as your question about mindset, so it goes back to some military and police training and things like that, where it's just not an option to give up. And I think that I can remember being on a ruck march in boot camp, and I'll never forget this. And we had been on, it's like the last week of boot camp. They take you on this like week-long journey. You probably remember this, Corneilous. I know you were in the military as well, and it's like 15, 20 miles out, something, and you walk the whole way and you're carrying all this stuff, and we've been out there however long. They keep you awake for days, and just really put you through it. And it's great training, character building. But, on our way back, I remember my feet hurting so bad. And I remember this Humvee going, we're two lines marching up the sides of the road. Okay. And there's this Humvee going up the middle of the road. He's going slow. I know they do this on purpose, but he's going slow. And there's guys in the back of the Humvee who have quit. I'm like, you got one more day and you're done with this. Come on, you can do this. But I just remember making the decision right then that I'm not riding in the back of that Humvee. I am, I'm going to do this. And I just think that that mindset, can be contributed to, or, applied to, the real estate business, or as an entrepreneur, or, whatever, we're trying to focus on. It's just having to look forward and say, okay, where do we get started, instead of focusing on how much work is it going to be.
Also, you said a lot of your success came from your thought leader platform. So out of all the platforms out there, what made you choose to be a podcaster?
Podcasting was a way that it allows me to meet all the experts in the industry. It allows me to have a way really to add value to someone who's way ahead of me in the business. Ultimately, you may call somebody, or you may email somebody that's, been doing this for 20 years, and you email them and say, hey, I'd like to take you out to coffee. A lot of people try that, and a lot of times they're going to say, I'm sorry, I just don't have time, or, I just can't do that right now. However, if you have a podcast and you can interview them, you get 30, 40 minutes of their time, one-on-one. You get to ask any questions, but then you also get to promote that person to your network, right? You're able to promote that person and their brand, in adding value to them before you're an expert. And so that's one big thing about podcasting, and having an interview-based podcast like I do. It allows me to meet all these people in the industry, well over 600 people now, in just 2 years. So it just grew my network very, very fast. Allows me to build tons of content, or create so much content in a quick or short amount of time. Really, it took tons of work, but that's just a few of the benefits of podcasting. And two, it's interview based, so I get to ask questions. I don't have to be the expert initially. Starting out, asking questions. Anybody can ask questions, right? Anybody can learn to ask questions.
So now second part, you said building a brand, because you got to build two different brands, one for your investors and also one for the other side, right? So how do you go about building a brand, and what's your thoughts about going through that process?
Yeah. So building a brand is somewhat strategic, right? But podcasting was instrumental in building a brand. And so think about all those connections that you have, now, over 600 people now, 650 interviews, all those people are also sharing their show with their network. Right. And so then they're putting our brand and our show that we did together out to their network. So it helps increasing our brand. But even back before that, I'm very big on just being as professional as possible, and just obviously just as high as integrity as we can have, just all the time. And I just feel like that's going to show. A lot of that started by networking, going to tons of conferences, like I mentioned. And then, and I would even go as far to say, I know we're talking about branding, but I would say our why has helped us. And I didn't see that in the beginning. I didn't know that was going to happen that way. But just by having that why and something that we're very passionate about, it's helped me, connect with lots of investors. They can, when you're at a conference and there's, hundreds of people there, they're all looking, for deals or for investors, right? For money, for capital.
Mm-hmm.
One or the other, and so everybody's having such similar conversations. After you have 50 conversations with 50 different people, you go home. Do you really remember who the 20th person was? Are you going to remember what their name is? And so, did you brand yourself well? If they don't remember who you are, and so my conversations are not always about real estate. When I'm at those events, everybody's talking about real estate, but I want to talk about something different, right? You got to stand out. And part of that was, like I said, I didn't plan it this way in the beginning, but talking about our why, talking about our mission, and people remember that. They see the passion in me about that, about our why, and they remember it. So when I follow up with them, which you should do, follow up with them, they remember that. They may not remember me exactly, but when I say, we talked about this, or, this is, I remember this about you, and, it comes to them. They remember who I am. So branding is so important. But I think it even goes back further, to your why, and just having that, just being extremely professional all the time. People are going to remember who you are.